I'm Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The IDF claims that the double-tap strike on Al-Nasser hospital in Gaza, which killed at least 20 people, was aimed at a camera positioned by Hamas. In response, Hamas has slammed the IDF report as baseless. Tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in Israel on the day of disruption in order to protest. The families of hostages have staged protests in front of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has emphasized on continued offensive in Gaza until the end of Hamas. US President Donald Trump is all set to chair a meeting on Gaza at the White House later today. Meanwhile, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar will also be in Washington. The discussion is expected to focus on plans for post-war reconstruction in Gaza. Donald Trump has yet again threatened Russia, indicating economic sanctions may be implemented if Russian President Vladimir Putin fails to agree to a ceasefire with Ukraine. After Donald Trump fired federal Governor Lisa Cook, she has refused to leave office and has stated that she will be suing the Trump administration. The US president's decision marks a dramatic escalation in his campaign to exert more control over the nation's monetary policy. Donald Trump says that he plans to seek a death penalty for suspected murders in Washington, D.C. He has reinstated the federal death penalty through an executive order on the first day of his administration back in January. The death toll from the Kajiki typhoon in Vietnam has now risen to 3. Rescue workers are meanwhile battling uprooted trees and downed power lines, while widespread flooding has brought chaos to the streets of Vietnam's capital, Hanoi. SpaceX has launched the 10th test flight of its Starship spacecraft and Super Heavy rocket booster. Both achieved a successful splashdown on opposite sides of the world during the roughly hour-long test. All right, viewers, those were the headlines and our top focus this hour. We're now learning that thousands of demonstrators are protesting across Israel, seeking to push the Israeli government to end the war in Gaza and strike a deal for the return of the hostages. Now, according to reports, protesters chanted, waved flags and carried placards with pictures of hostages held in Gaza. Let's in fact listen in to what some of the protesters had to say.
I'm here first and foremost to protest and to call for the government to make a deal and bring all of the hostages home and to end the war. This is what we need to do, and this is why I'm here.
For me, it's like an ongoing of war. It's always been something going on. And but this one in particular is like meaningless. It started somewhere and then it forgot its target and its aim, and in my point of view, it's going nowhere now. It's just maybe the benefit of the people who are taking out the decisions for us, and I disagree with him. I highly disagree with this way of thinking. Because I have to say no to the idea of going on with the war, and the thought of our people still being kept underground in unbearable places is impossible for me.
These protests follow thousands of others massing in Tel Aviv on 26th as the Israeli Security Cabinet convened. Now, after the cabinet meeting, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated that Israel's Gaza offensive will continue. Let's in fact take a closer look at what Netanyahu had to say.
אנחנו באים עכשיו מישיבת קבינט, אז אני לא חושב שאני יכול להרחיב יותר מדי, אבל להגיד דבר אחד, זה התחיל בעזה וזה ייגמר בעזה. אנחנו לא נשאיר את המפלצות האלה שם, אנחנו נשחרר את כל חטופינו, אנחנו נדאג שעזה לא תהווה יותר איום על ישראל.
Meanwhile, Israel is under mounting international pressure to wrap up its Gaza campaign, with Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff reportedly saying that the U.S. president would host a meeting on post-war plans for the enclave. Moreover, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is also set to meet Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar in Washington. Joining us on the broadcast today is Professor Kobi Michael. He's a senior researcher at the INSS and Misgav Institute. He's joining us live from Israel. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX. We do know that Netanyahu's offensive in Gaza continues. It continues to mount in order to end the terror that Hamas has been striking in the hearts of the people of Israel. But meanwhile, we're seeing now Israelis also take to the streets and basically putting forth their concerns that this offensive might also harm the hostages who are located in the tunnels, who are still being held by Hamas. What is going on the ground?
What is going on the ground is the continuation of the operation, mainly the preparations towards the big and the more substantial phase of this operation. And actually the preparations of the IDF are taken in, I would say, two stages or two domains. The first one is to prepare the safe zones for the citizens that will be evacuated from this area, from the city of Gaza. And the second domain or level is the preparations of the forces themselves. Meanwhile, the IDF is there on the suburbs of the city, continues the operation and continue pressuring Hamas, hoping that at the end of the day it will lead to the cease of the war and the releasing of the hostages by negotiation, and not by the need to occupy the city of Gaza.
All right. Meanwhile, some of the families of the hostages are now claiming that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is sacrificing, quote unquote, sacrificing the hostages. And they're now demanding a deal to be struck with Hamas in order to secure urgent release of the hostages. What do you think will happen? Do you think Netanyahu will buckle to this pressure that is being mounted?
I think that the demonstrators are relying on an assumption that I'm not sure that it is an assumption that corresponds necessarily with the reality, because they assume that once Israel will say yes, then we have a deal, the hostages, all of them will be released and the war will be ceased under the conditions or the demands of Israel. But this is not the situation. The situation is that Hamas still refuses to come back to the negotiation table. They are making many tricks and a strategy. They use a strategy of deception. I do not believe that they will be willing to release all the hostages. And even when they say that they are willing to come back to the negotiation table, it doesn't mean that eventually it will be translated to to action. So I think that this assumption should be questioned, at least. And I think that Israel does the utmost efforts in order to reach the hostages, in order to release the hostages, be it by negotiation or be it by military operation. There is no doubt that the situation is very severe, very difficult, and there is no doubt, on the other hand, that by military operation we are risking, or we are adding risks to the life and to the safety and security of the hostages. But in the very same time, by continuing the negotiation without any end to negotiation, we are risking the life of the hostages as well. So this is a sort of a very complicated situation, and I think that Israel does the maximum that it can in order to realize eventually the objectives of the war, which include, of course, the releasing of the hostages.
Absolutely. Professor Michael, I request you to stay on with us. There's more news coming in. We're now learning that as Israelis continue protests in order to pressurize their government to secure the release of hostages held in Gaza, a former hostage, Doron Steinbrecher, has now reflected on her own 471 days in captivity. Now, according to reports, she was held captive underground and has stated that she developed a strong bond with other young women who were held captive with her. Her friends, twin brothers, Gali and Aviv Berman, are still being held by Hamas, which attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, killing 1,200 innocent people and seizing 251 hostages who were then taken to Gaza. She has now expressed hope that all remaining hostages would be free soon. Let's in fact listen in to what she has to say.
The important thing now is to bring all the hostages home. Every moment, every second, they are in danger because there's no food, no water. The sanitary situation is very, very bad. We saw Rome and Eviatar. I've been there. I know what they thinking now, what they feeling now, the fear for your life. Every single moment you go to sleep and you don't know if you wake up. I felt there is no chance I will return home. I lost all the hope that I will return home and will see my family and friends.
All right, there, viewers, you've heard what Doron Steinbrecher had to say. She was a former hostage held in captivity for 471 days. Professor Kobi Michael still with us on the broadcast. All of this is taking place, as I mentioned earlier, even as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is slated to meet Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar. Now, according to reports, on cards for discussion are post-war plans for Gaza. What do you think will catalyze in this particular meeting?
I think that Israel and the American administration, mainly President Trump, are on the same page. And the U.S. administration supports, fully supports Israel with regard to its demand to go for an entire deal, which means that all the hostages will be released with the ceasing of the war. And I think that the American administration understands exactly where is the problem. The problem is not Israel, the problem is Hamas. And there is no doubt that the Israeli government wishes to release all the hostages as soon as possible. And there is no doubt that the Israeli government seeks to cease the war. The problem is that Israel has no partner in the other side, which means that Hamas is not willing to release the hostages, and Hamas is not willing to cease the war, to surrender, to leave the Gaza Strip, and to provide its own populace, its own people with any, I would say, chance or probability for a better future.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, of course, sharing your perspective on these very crucial developments that are taking place in the Middle East. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to what's transpiring as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. We're now learning that Russia has claimed to have launched strikes on Ukraine from multiple directions, stating that its forces captured the villages of Zaporozhye and Novohirskivka in Meanwhile, Ukraine has denied the loss of 2 villages, stating that its forces have halted the Russian advance and that fighting in the area is ongoing. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian drone strike sparked a fire. We're now, in fact, learning that a Ukrainian drone has sparked a fire. And this is the latest that we're tracking as far as Russia is concerned. This fire was sparked on the roof of an apartment building in the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don, prompting the evacuation of 15 residents. Rostov region governor Yuri Slusar has now stated that Russian anti-aircraft units shot down 10 Ukrainian drones over 3 parts of Rostov region. So this is the latest that we're tracking as far as the Ukraine-Russia conflict is concerned. Joining us on the broadcast is Jim Rice. He's a professor of international law, joining us from the Philippines. Thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX. We see these reports trickle in every single day as far as the Russia-Ukraine war and these drone strikes are concerned. Where do you think the war is heading next? Of course, Trump is trying to mount pressure on Vladimir Putin, threatening economic sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Well, it's always difficult to speculate what's going to happen in the future. But as a professor of international law who has taught for many years, all I can really do is to speak to the law and international norms. Putin's invasion in 2022 was a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, and the conduct that the Russians have demonstrated during the course of the war has been nothing short of being criminal and outrageous. So it's an illegal war. They've been bombing civilians illegally night after night after night, as you've correctly pointed out. In terms of what Trump has been doing, I would say that Trump has been doing nothing with regard to trying to curtail the actions of this, aggressor in the form of Russia and Putin. So all he does is he gives them these kind of false ultimatum, and then Putin ignores them, and then he has this meeting in Alaska, and again nothing happens. Putin completely disrespected Trump and the United States. So it's difficult to see how this will end, except for one thing. I note that the Ukrainians have been very skillful and adept at attacking Russian oil refineries and curtailing their supplies of petroleum. So if this continues, it may be that Putin's ability to wage this war will be curtailed.
Mm-hmm. Stay on with us. We're getting more information. We're now learning that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that Turkey, the Gulf states, or European countries could host peace talks with Russia. He added that it now depends on the United States to pressurize Moscow. Zelensky has made these comments in his nightly video address as his Chief of Staff and National Security Council chief visited Qatar to meet the defense minister. Meanwhile, Zelensky continues to call for talks with President Putin. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has stated that no agenda has been set for such a meeting up until now. Listen in to what the Ukrainian president has had to say.
Зараз на тижні будуть контакти з Туреччиною, будуть контакти з країнами Затоки, з країнами Європи, які можуть бути майданчиками для розмови з росіянами. З нашого боку все буде максимально готово, щоб війну закінчити. Важливо, щоб партнери це підтвердили. І надалі все буде залежати виключно від волі лідерів світу. Передусім від Сполучених Штатів Америки. Щоб тиснути на Росію, потрібні нові кроки, новий тиск, санкції, тарифи. Все це має бути на столі. Ми говорили про це з генералом Келлогом вчора. Ми працюємо з американцями дуже змістовно. Після нашої зустрічі в Вашингтоні ми маємо нову основу для спільної.
All right, there, viewers, you've heard what Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has had to say. Professor Jim Rice still with us on the broadcast. There were reports earlier circulating that Budapest was being seen as a location to host a potential trilateral dialogue. Now, Zelensky has come out and stated that, yes, while he's ready to meet Putin, they're looking at Turkey or the Gulf states or one of the NATO allies as a prospective area to host these talks with Russia. Do you think negotiations will catalyze in the near future?
No, I really don't. I say this categorical statement based on Putin's past behavior and on the fact that Putin has said that he just doesn't like Zelensky. And finally, Putin is not serious about peace. He's not serious about negotiations. And I would predict that with a reasonable degree of certainty that Putin will not meet face-to-face with President Zelensky, either in Budapest or in one of the Gulf states or anywhere else.
All right, so I request you to stay on with us as we continue to track further developments. Now we're shifting our focus away from the Russia-Ukraine war towards what is transpiring within the United States of America. We're now learning that U.S. Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook is filing a lawsuit to challenge her removal by U.S. President Donald Trump. Her lawyer has stated that Trump has no authority to fire her and the action lacks legal basis. Trump, meanwhile, claims that Cook made false statements on her mortgage and says that he has sufficient reason to remove her. The Fed has warned that governors can be removed only for cause protecting monetary policy independence. Listen in to what Trump's comment was on Lisa Cook.
Oh, sure, always. You always have legal fights. Look, I had a legal fight that went on for years with crooked people, with very horrible people, people that have been found out now between John Ratcliffe and Tulsi and Pam, and I mean, the things that we found out, of course. It's a very, very sad group of people. But no, she seems to have had an infraction, and she can't have an infraction, and especially that infraction, because she's in charge of, if you think about it, mortgages, and we need people that are 100% above board, and it doesn't seem like she was. Yeah, please.
Professor Jim Rice still with us on the broadcast. Interesting showdown taking place in the United States of America. Cook has not been charged with any wrongdoing. She is now vowed to fight against her dismissal. And do you think this could now open up a new high-stakes legal battle in the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, certainly it will. Very briefly, Trump is engaged in a full-scale power grab, and we can see this in a whole range of areas. And he's also engaged in a campaign of retribution against anyone who he perceives as his enemy. And it seems that Jerome Powers and Lisa Cook, members of the independent Federal Reserve Board, have appeared on Trump's enemies list. First of all, Trump does not have the authority, the legal authority, to fire Lisa Cook. Instead, they've engaged in a smear campaign against this woman, as well as two other of Trump's enemies. And most certainly, the only thing that Ms. Cook can do is to take legal action in order to block this illegal whatever it is on the part of Trump. I'm sorry, I didn't get your audio feed of Trump's comments.
Okay. What's interesting is in May, the U.S. Supreme Court had called the Federal Reserve a uniquely structured agency with a long history of insulation from political interference from the White House that should not be changed. We do know that the U.S. Supreme Court is more conservative leaning, mostly 6-3, if you look at the numbers. So do you think the U.S. Supreme Court will stick by its observations it had made earlier?
I've been covering the Supreme Court very closely for the past few years, and I agree with those are good observations on your part. It's my hunch that the Supreme Court is not going to go with Trump on this one. And the reason for that is because the Federal Reserve is an independent institution for good reason. And the idea is to bring accountability and checks on executive power. And obviously Trump wants to break through these barriers. Obviously, Trump wants to govern as Mao Zedong during the 1950s. He has no desire to be constrained by the law. And we see the disastrous economic policies of Mao, and we can see how Trump's tariffs have created economic chaos in the United States and around the world. And we've also seen that it's contributing to inflation. And this is the reason why, I believe, Trump wants to take control of the Fed in order to control interest rates by his own, from his own office.
He does want to lower them. All right, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast, sharing your perspective on these very, very crucial developments. Meanwhile, viewers, shifting focus away from the United States towards what's transpiring in Southeast Asia. We're now learning that Typhoon Kajiki has killed at least 7 people in Vietnam, leaving thousands of homes damaged and much of Hanoi underwater. The storm, which made landfall between Nha Trang and Ha Tinh provinces, destroyed over 81,500 hectares of rice and 4,500 hectares of other crops. Now, heavy rains continue across northern and north-central Vietnam, with authorities warning of flash floods and landslides in 9 provinces. Now, approximately 21,000 trees were toppled and nearly 1.6 million people lost power. Listen in to what some of the residents have had to say.
Cũng là tương đối, cái cơn bão này tương đối là rất là lớn. Anh làm ở đây từ năm 2000 thì đây là lần thứ 2 đón cái cơn bão này. Vì bão thì như em thấy đấy, xung quanh khu vực chúng ta ở đây thì đứng đây thì tương đối là thì anh nghĩ không phải là bản thân anh mà tất cả những người mà sau khi cơn bão đi qua, cái đầu tiên mình cảm thấy tức là xung quanh cái khu vực mình đang đứng ấy thì các cái cây cối và các cái khu vực nhà cửa thì rất là hoang tàn, nó thay đổi một cách nó rất là khác.
Mình thấy cây cối các thứ là bị ngã ngang đường, với cả là nói chung là ùn tắc rất nhiều, giao thông các thứ đi lại là nó không được thuận lợi, vì là cây cối đổ vỡ, rồi các cái biển quảng cáo rơi xuống rất là nhiều. Nói chung là cũng rất là may là vì không có thiệt hại về người, nhưng mà tài sản thì rất là nhiều, vì bão nó dữ dội quá mà lại là có nghĩa là nó đến rất là lâu, mấy tiếng đồng hồ thì làm sao nó chịu được. Rồi có người thì nói chung người thì chỉ có một số người là bị tai nạn nhẹ thôi, còn lại là thiệt hại về người thì không có, gần như là không có.
Joining us on the broadcast at this point is Desmond Majikudunmi. He's an environmentalist joining us from Lagos. Thank you so much for taking out time speaking to us on NewsX. The situation continues to deteriorate in Vietnam even as Typhoon Kajiki wreaks havoc. We're now learning that the death toll has risen from 3 to 7. There are more than 13 people who've been injured so far. Thousands have been evacuated. Over 81,500 hectares of rice, 4,500 hectares of other crops have been destroyed up until now. There's widespread devastation taking place. We do know that this particular region is prone to a lot of typhoons that occur at this point of time in the year annually. But what makes this particular typhoon different?
Well, like the previous typhoon that struck that particular region, it is heavier. That is, the wind speed has increased. In fact, this matched the record for that location in terms of wind speed. I mean, when you have wind blowing at 160 kilometers per hour, there's not that much structure that can withstand it. And it'll push the waters up from the river banks into the areas where people are habited. It is very, very unfortunate, but it's not unexpected, because what causes these heavier wind speeds? What causes these typhoons? It is the heat in the atmosphere that is also heating up the water bodies. And you have this differentiation of heat and then some cold air coming from somewhere else, and then a lot of moisture, because the heat will also evaporate water. This is a classic symptom of global warming. It's not that you don't have these type of weather patterns, but on a smaller scale, and the large ones will not come so frequently. The scientists have told us categorically, decades ago, that this is the symptom. If you heat up the planet the way we're doing it, by pouring millions of tons of heat-trapping gases, you're going to have this kind of scenario. So it is a huge wake-up call. Our hearts go out to the people there, and we hope or we pray that at least those people that have been afflicted by this will take the necessary action like they're trying to do in Spain now. The Prime Minister of Spain, he's saying that they must create a state of emergency over climate change. This is a global call, not just for Spain, not just for Vietnam, but for every nation in the world to tackle the biggest issue humanity has ever faced. It's not just going to go away if we blink our eyes. It's only going to go away if we stop causing the effect, which is the global warming that we are causing. We have to take care of nature because nature responds to what you give her. Nature is almost like what we can call instant karma. You give it to her, she gives it back to you. You sow a yam, you will not harvest a potato, you will reap that yam. So wake up call, and I do believe that the good, great people of that wonderful place called India will understand this a lot more than other people in the world.
All right, sir, thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. Now, fans have been left in awe as pop superstar Taylor Swift has announced her engagement to NFL star Travis Kelce in an Instagram post. Singer shared a series of photos showing Kansas City Chiefs tight end Kelce proposing with images of the couple embracing, holding hands and highlighting Swift's diamond engagement ring. US President Donald Trump publicly wished the couple a lot of luck. In recent years, Swift and Kelce have been spotted together at numerous events, with the NFL star also attending her concerts. The engagement announcement comes just days after Swift offered a rare insight into their relationship during an appearance on Kelce's podcast while announcing her 12th studio album, The Life of a Showgirl. As the pop star announced the big news on Instagram, US President Trump has also sent his wishes. Listen in.
Well, I wish him a lot of luck. No, I think he's a great player. I think he's a great guy, and I think that she's a terrific person. So I wish them a lot of luck.
Swift's announcement has taken the internet by a storm. The Swifties are in awe of the couple, excited, and now await marriage details. Let's in fact listen in to what some of Taylor Swift's fans have had to say.
I'm super excited. I think one thing that I'm most excited about is that Jason Kelce's kids get to call Taylor Aunt Tay, and I'm ready for Travis and Taylor to have kids. I'm so excited. I've been a Swiftie since I was 6 years old, so I've seen her go through all the relationships and breakups and always come out on top and happy, and I think she deserves love. She's so famous, and she deserves someone who, you know, can match her energy. I love her so much.
I was expecting it to come like later. Like I thought it would be like in maybe like a year or two because she just like came out with her new album and everything. So I feel like so many things like happened this month, like with her.
All right, viewers, due to paucity of time, we must wrap up this bulletin here. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.